So our first presenter is John Kimita Njenga, that's the JK, the first choral conducting student in Africa. And he studies a doctorate in choral conducting, at Ball State University. He's also a composer, choreographer, and an amazing dancer. And he has conducted the Kenyan Boys Choir, the world renowned, and also has a current group for. He decided it should not be just boys. He wanted to have incorporate even women. It's called
Encar.
So just watch him, and he'll be talking about interculturalism in Kenyan choral music. Welcome.
Good afternoon. As you heard, my name is, I go by JK. My name is JK Njenga. I'm a choral conducting doctoral student from Ball State University. And my presentation today is about interculturalism in Kenyan choral music. And as we've heard, we have very limited time, so I don't know how fast I can talk or I should be. So I don't think I'll cover everything because I have a lot to cover. So if I go too fast, bear with me about that. So to start, I'll just say I'll talk about African music traditions. African musics are the music heritage of the continent, and to consider all music traditions of Africa as homogeneous will be inaccurate due to the vast number of cultures on the continent, with about 1,000 distinct languages spoken around the continent. And as I'm talking about African music, African traditional music, it's described as music that's associated with traditional African institutions of the pre-colonial era, the music that have survived the impact of the forces of Western and other forms of acculturation, and is therefore distinct in idiom. And one of the elements in African music include rhythm, call and response. As we demonstrated earlier with the music we were singing, we had call and response. The rhythm was driving, people joined us to dance. So that's a bit of elements that one of my professors called them, they are resistant to change. We know that change is inevitable, but these characteristics are resistant to change. You try to change them, but they'll draw you back to it. And what I'll be talking about is the influence of traditional culture and practices upon contemporary Kenyan choral music societies has remained strong, where composers maintain the traditional music styles and characteristics in their music to preserve the music heritage in Kenya. And in this paper, or in this presentation, I explore the interculturalism between Kenyan music traditions and the beginning of folk music performances in concert stage through Kenyan music festivals, and how choral composers in the country reflect interculturalism in their compositions and arrangements. And we'll just go through one of the arrangements by a Kenyan composer and see how he's used interculturalism in his music. So a scholar by the name Akin categorizes African composers into four. So the first is a composer who bases his music entirely on Western models, and in which the composer doesn't introduce any African elements. So if you listen to this music, you'll hear, you won't hear particularly African elements. You'll feel like you're listening to the likes of, let's say, Haydn, Mozart. So he won't introduce any African elements. The second category is music in which African elements form an integral part of the idiom, using African instruments, text, and stylistic components. So now this is music that's now the core material of it is African. And in this session, we'll get to hear more about it when Shaka comes and talks about more of African music. And the third one will be music which thematic material is borrowed from African sources, but which is otherwise Western idiom and instrumentation. And the fourth one is music which idiom is derived from African traditional cultures, employ African instruments, and in which composer has not introduced non-African ideas. And the categorization describes the types of composers in Africa and show how African composers have a cultured Western music styles in African music to create new styles that can be identified as contemporary African music. And the avenue that has been used mostly in Kenya is the music festival introduced by the British in 1941. Then, and at that time, most of the music that was sung were British set pieces, so British arranged music, hymns, and now African music started to be incorporated in 1952. Then we started having folk songs being performed in the concert stage. Then a lot of interest in music from the African composers came through, so they went to study music through a program by a musicologist called Graham Hislop. And now the folk music performance took a different direction, and we can listen to. This is now the folk song in its let me say a natural element. Then next we'll hear the same song, but now on a concert stage arranged for female voices. So yes, so as we continue, I'm really going fast. We'll be talking about a piece by Joseph Zai, as if that's his little bit of his background. As I go next, we'll be talking about a piece called Ngima Pololomba. We all know Ngima Lomba, Ngima Lomba, Ngima Pololomba. So you see that's African. I can call and you can respond. You see? So now getting it from that African idiom and now arranging it for soprano, alto, and bass. So the first arrangement was done in 1998, and he continued editing it, and in its final edition, he incorporated the rutu, now the African fiddle. He incorporated the sound box, the nyaduong, and we'll hear a little bit clip on it. So he started by little like the basic call and response without any African instruments, and now further down the years he incorporated the African instruments. And just structurally, the music is structured similar to a form in classical music called the sonata form. So it has an exposition, a development, and a recapitulation, which can further go and end with a coda at the end. And this is just the call and response, what we've done. The Ngima Lomba, One Watio. Then, as I've said, incorporating traditional practices, traditional music instruments, dance movements, and in other occasion voice embellishments such as ululations. And this is like the first edition. Then next I'll play the one with the musical instrument. You can see down here we have then the root will call. Then we'll go back to the song. So to conclude, my main takeaway from this is to include more of music by African composers, by our Kenyan composers into the class, so that we can do more analysis than do, because when I was studying in high school, we used to have analysis of sonatas by Beethoven, concertos by Haydn. But you see, when we look at music by our own, we can see the same structures that can teach the students the same concepts we learn from analyzing the concertos from the Western classical music. So my takeaway is just to try and incorporate more African music into the classes, so that we can see the comparison on how our composers think in putting music on paper. Thank you very much.
Great. So we have 4 minutes of questions. Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation and for your adrenaline. So my first question, there's some terms you use that I don't understand. Is it sondaros and concheras?
Yeah, that's why I say bear with me, because I don't have time to go into, you see, like the presentation is over. So I had to rush over like a lot of things into the time that I was given. So if I had more time, I will explain to you without the jargon what it means. But bear with me. That's all the time I had to put my presentation to you.
So the second question is, you are talking about kind of this shifting from the traditional to modern music fused with some traditional elements. But the way you are putting it, according to my understanding, is like the modernized traditional music is incorporating some musical instruments like orutu and all that. I don't know whether, to me, I think the orutu was part of the traditional. So from what I understood, is like it's now being incorporated.
No, it's not now being incorporated. As I started, like we started with the folk song. I played the judu in its natural element. So it was lifted up from now its natural element to the concert stage. And now most of these traditional instruments, most of the players are very, very scarce. To find an orutu player who is proficient with what they are doing, it's very rare to find. You'll have to look deep so that you can find a player. So, and now, as I've said, the piece I played has gone through editions year after year. So the composer saw that there is a